Hi, my name is Adriana, and today I will be doing a book review of Stone Blind by Natalie Haynes. So I will have this review broken up into a couple different sections: synopsis, mythological basis, characters, and themes. I will do my best not to spoil anything, but I will be talking about the myth that this book is based on. So if you are completely unfamiliar with the story of Perseus, Athena, and Medusa, and you don't want to be spoiled for that story, then maybe you should read the book first and then come back, or look up the myth first and then come back. But I will be talking about the myth in detail. I will again do my best to try to keep from spoiling anything that Natalie Haynes does differently with the myth within this book, but I will be kind of talking about it in vague terms. So without further ado, let's jump into the synopsis. This book follows the story of Perseus from many different viewpoints, including Medusa, Athena, Danae, his mother, as well as some other minor characters within the story. The story actually starts well before Perseus's birth, with the birth of Athena, the goddess of wisdom, and then works its way towards the story of Danae as she gets locked in a tower because of a prophecy that her son will overthrow her father, a king. When she becomes pregnant, via divine intervention, she is put in a wooden trunk with Perseus, her baby, and they are floated across the sea and land upon an island where they are taken in by a fisherman. The fisherman's brother is the king of the island and takes a liking to Danae and sends Perseus off on a quest that he thinks Perseus is going to die on so that he can move in on Danae, the mother. Perseus ends up being successful, again with some divine intervention, and rescues a fair maiden upon his way back to the island, rescues his mother, and that's kind of the main through plot of the book. There's a lot of side plots with the gods' machinations, and I will get into that a little bit as I discuss the further themes and characters within this book, but as a general synopsis, that's it. So like I said, as a general synopsis, this book really is supposed to take place as a story of Perseus, but Perseus really kind of takes a sideline into the themes and the overall feel of the book. He almost feels like a plot device that is really just connecting all of these other side characters' stories together, and that's who we really care about. We actually don't even finish his arc in the original myth all the way through this book. So in the original myth, as I mentioned in the beginning, it was prophesized that he would kill his grandfather, and he ends up doing so by accident through kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy, a very common theme in mythology. That was not even covered in this book at all. As soon as Perseus returns back to his home island and rescues his mother, we're done talking about Perseus. He's out. So when I was gearing up to do this video, I wanted to do kind of some more background research. I have some reference texts that I referred to, as you do with reference texts. So two of the ones I referred to was classical mythology. This is just a textbook that I had from one of my classes in college. I took a mythology class. If you can see down here at the bottom, it is all dudes. This textbook was 100% written by men. The other one I kind of looked at was kind of a childhood reference text on Greek mythology. Again, I am assuming written by a man. I don't know for sure. It's just Dolores, so that's just a last name, but... Oh, okay. Looks like this was actually written and illustrated by a couple, so a man and a woman. I have a feeling it was heavily influenced by men. And then the last one I referred to was actually the Medusa section of Pandora's Jar, written by the same author, Natalie Haynes. Natalie Haynes is a trained classicist, so I feel pretty confident in using this as a reference text for especially this book and going forward. But something I thought was really interesting, comparing kind of all these different reference texts to the story I actually just read, Stone Blind. Stone Blind does spend a lot of time on the creation of Medusa as a monster. So it is generally well accepted that Medusa started out as a fairly normal mortal girl and then was punished by Athena after Medusa was assaulted by Poseidon in Athena's temple. Because, you know, gotta punish the woman, obviously. Athena's punishment was to turn her into this hideous gorgon who could freeze people to stone with her eyes, the kind of Medusa that we know. I think the earliest classical writing we can find that in is Ovid's Metamorphoses, and that could potentially be why you don't find it in reference texts like my classical mythology textbook and Dolores. Those might be relying on older texts, I guess earlier Greek texts, versus Ovid was a Roman writer, Roman poet, so he was a little bit later on, but generally I feel like most classicists do take in Ovid's writings into accounts of mythological canon. So I just thought it was kind of interesting that neither of those texts really talk about the creation of Medusa as a character at all. They just say she existed with her two other Gorgon sisters, and that's where we're at. She was a monster the whole time. The other part of kind of mythological basis, mythological comparison, especially when reading Pandora's Jar, Natalie Haynes' nonfiction book where she can kind of be a little more free with her thoughts and what she thinks, Stone Blind really starts to feel like a hit piece on Athena, and she really comes off as kind of a pick-me girl who doesn't support other women, wants nothing to do with other women, does the most she can to present masculinely and really put down femininity wherever she can. Again, like I said, punishing a woman for being assaulted in one of her sacred temples when obviously her uncle Poseidon was the perpetrator. So looking at the characters in this book, I really want to start with the beginning, I guess. So we start off this book with Medusa's two Gorgon sisters, Stheno and Euryale? I don't quite know. I'll put them up here. Stheno and Euryale are living their best Gorgon life on this beach, and Medusa gets dropped off onto their beach as a baby, and they go from badass hunters to badass but compassionate caretakers. They learn to bake bread and raise sheep so that they can support their mortal sister in growing up. They raise her, they become her moms, basically. And it's just so sweet, and I love that arc from badass hunters to like badass moms, like really good, cool moms. Because I think that's an arc you don't get to see much in like most media. Usually you go from like caring, compassionate mom to like badass assassin, but like to see it go the other way was really neat. And as I had kind of mentioned, Perseus, while being technically a main character within this story, I would say like the three main characters are Perseus, Medusa, and Athena. We really don't dive into much of Perseus as a character. We don't really see him grow or change. We just kind of see him stumble through this quest with the help of Athena and Hermes, getting help from many, many gods along the way, and like I said, just fumbling through it and somehow finding success. Just kind of, you know, general white man things. On the other hand, Athena and Medusa, we really delve in deep into their characterization, why they are the way they are, and kind of two sides of the same coin. Athena being an Olympian, being in power, having anything she could possibly want, but still being hateful and uncompassionate. And Medusa, on the other hand, really living a very simple life with just her sisters, some sheep on the beach, but being one of the most compassionate and caring people out there. Even after she gets cursed by Athena, she still doesn't act monstrous. She's very kind. She blindfolds herself so that she can't turn anything into stone. She's still just a really, really great human and a very good sister, and it makes what happens towards the end of the story so, so devastating. So, like I had said, if you know anything about this myth, you know that Perseus is going to come in and decapitate her, because that is his quest, is to decapitate a Gorgon. And once he does that, we actually still continue on with a point of view from the head of Medusa, but no longer being Medusa, because Medusa was immortal. You get your head cut off, you do tend to die, but through a weird magic sort of thing, the head of the Gorgon is now known as the Gorgonian. Through this viewpoint of the Gorgonian, we get a totally different side of how to deal with grief. So, like I had mentioned, Medusa, when she was alive, very caring, very compassionate, very sweet, wants everybody around her to be happy and healthy. And then we get to the Gorgonian, and she is just the, or I guess it I don't think it really self-identifies in any sort of gender, but it is the embodiment of female rage, just looking to hurt and destroy anything in its path, which, yeah, I could see that. Medusa obviously had experienced many traumas through her life, being abandoned by her birth parents, to be left on a beach to be raised by her sisters, being assaulted by a god in a much higher position of power, being forced to live with this curse and wanting to not hurt the people around her with this power she couldn't control, and then eventually being decapitated in her sleep by a man wearing an invisible hat and winged shoes. So you could see where some of that rage is coming from, and all of that rage gets distilled down into this Gorgon head. So it feels like kind of a villain origin story of this Gorgon head and why it is the way it is. I thought that was a really interesting way to take this story. It is not what I was expecting from it at all, and I thought it was a really interesting read. So from there, I want to jump to the writing style of this book, kind of similar to A Thousand Ships. A Thousand Ships by Natalie Haynes. We get many point of views from different characters, different groups, including olives. Like, you get a point of view chapter. I think you get 2 point of view chapters from olives, like the personification of olives, as well as the snakes of Medusa's hair. There's a chapter that's just a conversation between the snakes of Medusa's hair, and it is so cool and so engrossing. And some of those point of views are actually written in the second person, so it is like that point of view character is speaking directly to you, and it is really engaging. Again, everything about the way this book is put together and portrayed is just really engaging and really interesting, especially if you're a huge Greek mythology nerd like I am. And finally, one of the things I want to talk about is that this book does focus a lot on the gods as characters, as parts of the story, and because the gods are immortal and have been around for millennia, they tend to not interpret time in the same way, and we actually get a little bit of that through the writing. There is one chapter that an event happens, and halfway through the chapter, the goddess Athena is talking about this event, and then this character goes, okay, great, but like, why are we talking about this? This happened a century ago. But in the beginning of the chapter, it was happening like right then, and Athena was watching it, and then all of a sudden you just skip 100 years. And it's a little jarring at first when you're reading it, but then you think, oh yeah, this is definitely the way an immortal being would perceive time. They would experience an event, sit on it for a little bit, and then talk about it, but their little bit is 100 years versus like a human. If you experience something, maybe it'll take you like a day or two to kind of process what happened, what's going on, and then you talk about it then as if it just happened. But for a god, 100 years, that probably does just feel like it just happened. So I really enjoyed that. Everything about the writing style, about the way this story was put together, I think really aided the telling of the story and the themes, which is what I'm gonna get to next. I think there were a lot of themes within this book, but the one that really kept like coming up again and again to me, and something I really felt important and connected to with me was the theme of power. What is power? Who has it? Who can wield it as they please? And is it really a power if you can't use it as you like? This is explored a bunch of different ways, which is why I feel like to me it was the most important theme to explore, because every single story that is told I felt like had something to do with power structures, how they're perceived by different people within the hierarchy of power structures. I think one of the most obvious examples of this is a conversation between Medusa's 2 sisters, Stheno and Euryale, and they're having a conversation about Medusa's ability to turn people to stone with her eyes. And one sister is like, this is great, what an incredible power, she can totally protect herself now, because Medusa's sisters are immortal, so they're not worried about death, but their mortal sister, they're obviously very concerned about her because she could die at any minute. So Euryale, the one sister, is very excited about this power for Medusa. She can finally protect herself. They don't have to worry about her. She's so much stronger now than even them, because they have to rely on physical strength, versus Medusa can just open her eyeballs and kill anybody. And The other sister, Stheno, has a little bit of a different opinion. She says not only can she turn people to stone, she will turn people to stone without her own input or wanting to do so. So she is blinded herself, literally blinded herself with a blindfold, and can no longer see the faces of the people she loves because she doesn't want to turn them to stone. And can it really be called a power or a gift if you have no personal control over it, if you have no autonomy in relation to that power? Lots of thoughts, very cool, really enjoyed it. I think, other good examples is the way Hera has to... So if you're familiar with Greek mythology at all, you know that Zeus steps out on his wife Hera a lot. That's kind of his whole thing. And Hera, not a fan. But because she is a woman, she is now a step down in the hierarchy of Olympus, of the gods. So Zeus, king head honcho, Hera, second in line, she's the queen of the gods, but the queen can't really punish the king or take out any sort of revenge. So she has to do all of these clever kind of backdoor plans to get revenge on him in certain ways. She torments him through non-physical kind of mental annoyances, I guess I would say. And same thing with Poseidon's wife, Amphitrite. Obviously Poseidon steps out on his wife with Medusa, and again, Amphitrite is powerless to really do anything about it. She's just supposed to accept it and move on. But she comes up with a plan with her fellow sisters to kind of find a way to get some amount of revenge on Poseidon and kind of make him hurt himself through his own actions and ideas. And I just think it's a really interesting way to explore power dynamics, because obviously both Amphitrite and Hera are immortal, very extremely powerful beings. They end up punishing mortal women a lot, so they put down other people the same way they are put upon by their husbands, but they are also experiencing a lot of abuse from the top down. So it just kind of shows how shit rolls downhill, I guess. So, the head honcho at the top hurts his wife gets upset, can't really hurt up, so she hurts down. And that is a very common theme in Greek mythology. We see that a lot. But I think it was really well explored in this book, especially with the addition of Medusa's power being really outright discussed that way. So if you couldn't tell, I gave this book 5 stars. Because I'm a huge Greek mythology nerd, and I really love anybody who's willing to take the time and care to flesh out these stories in a way that I haven't seen before, and really humanize certain characters and maybe expose some characters that we may have thought higher about in years past. Specifically, I'm thinking about the goddess Athena, especially, with late 90s / early 2000s kind of girl boss feminism. I think Athena was really kind of bumped up in the feminist pedestal of, wow, what an incredible role model for Greek mythology fans who are girls. But in reality, Athena was really not that great of a human. And not saying that all role models need to be perfect, but that is not the only type of femininity that counts. I think seeing a story like Stone Blind, where the shining light is really put upon someone like the immortal Medusa, who was so kind and compassionate and willing to put herself in harm's way in order to protect the people around her that she loved, and even strangers. She was willing to put herself in danger to protect other people, and I think that's really, really cool to see that kind of feminine strength be really put to the forefront and not just being masculine. So yeah, I've talked about this for 30 minutes now, so that's probably enough. If you do want to talk about this book more, please reach out to me. I would love to discuss it more. I really enjoyed this book. I really enjoy anything that gives me an excuse to do a deep dive into Greek mythology. I love it. So thanks so much for watching, and I will catch you on the next video.